All right, welcome to another episode of the Credder Podcast. I'm your host, Chase Palmieri, and with me today is Bill Ottman. He's the CEO and co-founder of Minds. The company was founded in 2011 as a blockchain-based alternative to Facebook, where users can actually earn money or cryptocurrency for their time and usage on the platform. I actually had the privilege of interviewing Bill a few years ago on the Project Censored show, and today I'm especially excited to discuss his company's recent move to convert about 25% of their balance sheet into crypto, following the lead of folks like Michael Saylor at MicroStrategy. So Bill, thanks so much for being back with me.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So let's start with some of the facts here. You sent me over a Fortune magazine article that kind of laid out some of the numbers, but as I know at Credder, and as you know, sometimes these numbers get wrong when they actually go through the press. So let's narrow this down first. Minds bought $2.5 million worth of crypto, which they're saying in the article is about from that $10 million Series B round that you raised in June. So does that sound correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about this breakdown. So from that article, again, let's verify this. Is it about 5% Bitcoin, 10% Ether, and 10% into Circle's interest-bearing or interest-earning USD coin-backed Circle?
It's actually more than that now, because we actually put another million in after this, the quarter after. Probably wish we had done it at the end of this quarter.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's actually a million more, and so we put another 500 into ETH and another 500 into Bitcoin. But yeah, those are right. So we've got like a million USDC, and then kind of reflective of what you said.
Okay, and so how important was Michael Saylor's step at MicroStrategy, being the first kind of public company to convert their balance sheet, now most of their balance sheet, and leveraged with debt to do so? How important was that to allow you to kind of have the cover to make this decision at what is kind of a much smaller and not public private company?
Mm-hmm. I mean, we have been holding smaller amounts of crypto, both Bitcoin and ETH, for a long time. But I mean, well before MicroStrategy kind of came on the scene. But I'm not going to take credit for kind of the massive inspiration that he has created, and that absolutely what played a role in our decision and justifying it to our team and making a much larger allocation, digestible. I think that, the fact that we are a crypto company, we want to align with our mission. We want to vote with our resources. We believe in the ecosystems, and we want to kind of be a part of it. We don't want to just kind of be talking about it and have tools that facilitate this, but not even really be directly involved ourselves. So yeah, I mean, seeing Tesla, Square, MicroStrategy, many others get on board, that was awesome. I really hope though that what we can do, even though we're much smaller private company, I want to try to unleash this pattern among private companies, among smaller companies. Like, yes, major, big public companies have the biggest impact, but, thousands of startups doing it too for more modest amounts. I mean, that adds up, and that can have a huge impact. So I really think that regardless of how large your company is, it makes sense.
Yeah, so I was actually going to bring up that point. A lot of what makes Bitcoin interesting is that there's the traditional investing world is actually kind of held back from investing until a lot of that regulation was worked out. So it was actually to the benefit of the individuals for kind of the first time ever to get in before the institutions. And it also relates to kind of smaller private companies being able to make this move of converting some of their balance sheet to crypto before, Michael Saylor and these others have kind of paved the way in the public markets. So would you say that the same thing kind of applies, that smaller companies and startups have kind of an advantage here, a leg up to get in before the public companies right now?
For sure. I mean, we're more nimble. I mean, I'm not going to say it's easy. Every company has a board to go through, and there's a huge education. Getting people to take the leap is I wouldn't call it easy, but it's becoming easier. And yeah, I think that businesses, inflation is a problem. I mean, holding your reserves in the bank is like makes absolutely no sense. I mean, some of it fine, but like it's really like arguably neglectful, I would say, to not have a small percentage in crypto. I think that there's a lot of fear, but and you have to be ready for the roller coaster, but it's just sort of undeniably a more fair and transparent system that I think on the long term is going to be an amazing decision for everyone who gets involved.
And I'm assuming that you chose 25% or roughly therein as your marker because, um, like we said, inflation means that if you're just holding it in the bank, you're holding onto a melting ice cube. But at the same time, as a company that's operating and has employees and salary, you need to have some amount of that kind of held in cash in the bank account to make payroll. So
Yep.
can you just kind of talk me through why the 25% mark?
Yeah, I think it was sort of a balance that we came to, juggling the options. I mean, there may have been some people on the team who wanted to go deeper, and others who wanted to do less. And that's where we ended up. I mean, me personally, I'm like, not to go into too much detail, but like I'm deep. I'm very deep. I want to maximize my exposure to the financial market that I think is going to be best for humanity and best for the participants in the long run. So I'm interested in participating both from a philosophical perspective, but also because I feel like inevitably many different industries are going to keep gravitating towards, major public blockchains because they're just more fair and transparent and you know um, accessible to participants. And I find it fascinating that you're seeing interest from both the left and the right uh, with regards to these distributed systems. It's not like there's a one website called the Blockchain Socialist, which I highly recommend people check out. Because there may be some on the left who might call it just a bunch of crypto libertarians, like, or crypto bros, but there absolutely are really intelligent people on the left who understand. I mean, what are public blockchains? They're commons. They're commonly operated and owned infrastructure. That's what socialism is all about. It's about the workers owning the means of production. Now, it also has all of these libertarian components as well, and because of the freedom that it is enabling. So I find that beautiful. Like, I really am fascinated by any system or network that can bring together the left and the right like that.
So let's go a little deeper there. It seems to me that a lot of the pushback on Bitcoin is actually coming from the left these days, which I agree, I think makes no sense and is more a factor of kind of needing more education in the space.
Yeah.
One of the kind of common tropes is that, oh, we don't want to embrace Bitcoin because either it's just a speculative instrument to make people rich, or it's hackable, or the energy usage is something that comes up a lot
Right.
on the
Right.
left because that's kind of a core issue. And I we don't necessarily need to take the time to get into why that's kind of a false understanding. And of course, Bitcoin and a lot of these other cryptos that are being mined are actually predominantly mined with renewable energy resources more than any other kind of commodity that's mined. But what is it like, if you could speak just to the left and explain to them why they need to embrace this technology, why this technology is actually the solution that they've been looking for and waiting for all these
Mm.
years, if you could sum up that kind of understanding for them, how would you do it?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I would first say that if you want to go through the full list of Bitcoin FUD talking points, Nick Carter, if you look up, he has this thing, it's like this multi-dimensional cube. I forget what he calls it, but it has like each
The
kind of piece of
dice,
FUD, the dice
the
and
FUD dice.
the
Yeah.
FUD dice. Yeah. So I'm not gonna do nearly as good a job as he would. So learn about the FUD dice. You'll go quantum computing. I think that one actually needed to be added on when I watched him on Lex's show. But the energy. So I think that financial corruption, crony capitalism, um, I think a lot of that is solved through having a much more hard sound money system, and transparency. There's a number of principles like the Bitcoin in Black America was a book that was written specifically about how what is really going to benefit marginalized communities on the long term. And it's just a fact, like if you look at authoritarian regimes around the world and where Bitcoin is thriving and where it's giving financial opportunity to underprivileged communities, the bankless communities. I mean, it's just not even a question. All that you need is a phone, and you have a bank on your phone.
Yeah, inconfiscatable wealth also,
Right.
or as much as it can be inconfiscatable. Yeah.
Yeah. So, in terms of the energy stuff, I mean, look, first of all, the energy usage of the established financial system, I mean, I'm pretty sure there's like 10 banks within walking distance of my house, which, like, I don't know the carbon footprint of all of these, physical buildings everywhere, but that's actually not mentioned enough.
Yeah.
I don't think. I mean, yeah, okay, so you have the technical infrastructure, energy usage, but then Bitcoin doesn't have any of that.
Right.
Like we don't need all of this physical footprint, and I think that there are really great arguments that I'm again not going to do as great a job as others already have clearly laid out, like Nick. But there's all kinds of incentives that are emerging to renewable energy incentive. I mean, Bitcoin miners want renewable energy. I mean, it makes it cheaper for them to, and their overhead is less.
Yeah.
And I've seen. I was watching a YouTube video a couple days ago. This guy who has a full solar Bitcoin rig on his farm. The whole thing is completely renewable. So we're gonna get there, and I think that proof of work has undeniable value. I also, I'm not a maximalist. I absolutely, think that Ethereum is a really important financial infrastructure as well, with different capabilities, different goals as well. One is Bitcoin is supposed to be reliable, not change as much, to be honest. You want it to be predictable. Ethereum is just this super creative, composable space where you can create all different types of instruments. It was literally designed to be a general purpose blockchain. So I like both. I like to be positive about both. I know that there's all of this kind of debate out there about one versus the other, but I try to stay away from that.
So on that note, it's fair to say that Minds is built on top of Ethereum, right? You're using okay. So
we do support Bitcoin payments as well.
Okay, cool. And so you guys decided to go with about 5% Bitcoin allocation, 10% Ether, and then 10% into the Circle interest earning. And we can talk about that later. But why 5 Bitcoin and 10 Ether?
It was actually, no, it was, we put 1.5, 50, we put 750 ETH, 750 Bitcoin, and 1 million USDC in the first wave. And then we put another 500 of Bitcoin, another 500 of ETH in the second wave. So
Okay.
I don't know what those add up to. That's like, what is that? 1.25
Yeah.
of
Okay.
each. No, we kept it split.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you guys need to have this might be my most naive question. Do you guys need to have a lot of Ether on the balance sheet to run the transactions happening on your platform, or is that kind of unrelated? This is really just more of a balance sheet strategy.
Yeah, that's unrelated. I mean, we do have some ETH, which sits in some of our smart contracts for different functions on the site, but that's kind of an isolated system. Like
Okay.
this was more specifically like a treasury allocation.
Okay. And so you mentioned that Minds had already had some crypto on its balance sheet, even from kind of the early days. Did that help in your conversations with investors when you were either kind of preparing them that this move was coming or letting them know that the move was coming, whether they liked it or not? What was the kind of back and forth with your investors?
Yeah, I mean, look, like we did a round in June. We raised from Futo, which is a tech freedom group out of Austin. And, in our conversations, like discussing, what aspects of our stack are decentralized, you guys are using Ethereum. Why'd you make that choice? Well, and, was that a good choice? Like objectively, it was a great choice. I mean, over the past 5 years, it's been an amazing wave of development that is happening on Ethereum. I mean, so many super smart developers. I mean, that's actually the most compelling thing about Ethereum. That so much engineering talent is just pouring in. And, these people, aren't, the incentives are just are very well thought out. For all of the participants. And I think that with the move to proof of stake this year, those are even arguably more well thought out. And, but that's also, there's huge risk that comes with that kind of a shift from proof of work mining to proof of stake validation. And, but it also, it's exciting for some, like, I'm not a miner, but, would I consider running a validator in ETH2? Like, yeah, because I can do it on my normal machine, and it's not nearly as much of a compute overhead. So I think that the decentralization of the validation is a huge deal for Ethereum. But at the same time, I think there's undeniable value to the way that Bitcoin does it. So I don't know where you stand on kind of this whole debate.
On Ethereum versus Bitcoin,
Yeah.
I think it's, two completely different things. It's not Coke and Pepsi.
Exactly.
It's more like Coke and Volvo. It's they're completely different things. I think Bitcoin wants to be the monetary layer, the monetary protocol, and Ethereum wants to be kind of the development protocol, if you will.
I couldn't agree more. And tech maximalism historically has always been a horrible decision. There's different tools for different problems, and it's just, I'm going to start using that. I like that. It's not apples and oranges. It's like completely different objects.
Yeah. Okay. So did you have to, as a private company, seek approval from your investors to do this, or just from your board?
Yeah, just from our board. So we did do an equity crowdfunding round in 2017, where we raised like $1 million from like 1,500 members of our community. But the way that that's all structured, it's still, kind of these types of decisions are still at the board level. And our community was super excited to see what we were doing. And I think that, they want us to lead the way, and it's been great so far. And yeah, but the stomach muscle that you develop being in this market, as we're, maybe just coming out of right now, it is an amazing muscle. I think for a variety of reasons, like, I guess for people who might not know what I'm talking about. I mean, when you when your assets can fluctuate like up to 50% value in like a few days, that is something that really makes you evaluate your ethics, your morals, your philosophy. Why am I doing this? Like, what do I actually care about? And um and when you hold through it, and you sort of, it's like you're involved in this sort of materialistic system in a sense, but it's also teaches you that you do care about if you stay, you do care about the principles to a degree. You have to be able to handle it. And so I just find that lesson in like psychologically that it teaches you is just unbelievable. And it also, like, it's so easy to get so entitled so quickly. Like, in your bank account, you sit on it and, it actually loses value year over year. You don't visibly see that, but if you're really paying attention, that's happening. And that's sort of like, okay, for your whole life. And then, with crypto, things will go up like 10x, and suddenly you're like, oh, so excited. The next day it goes down like 10-20%, and you start to feel, you're like, wait a second, I'm getting depressed, but yet I'm still up 8x from where I was like 6 months ago. And this is where, like, it's always about zooming out in crypto, because the charts for the last decade are just, it's like on average like 200% a year. Mm-hmm. And so that sense of entitlement it's great, like keeping that in check, and having this external force like keep your ego in check it's kind of, I enjoy it. I've started to almost appreciate the volatility, even though it's scary.
Yeah, it really comes down to your time horizon as an investor, which everyone that's investing, that should be the goal of the framing of their investment, should be 5+ 10+ year investments, not these kind of short-term flips that unfortunately maybe are rewarded or encouraged somewhat with kind of the big retail movement and apps like Robinhood, where people are investing and trying to make that quick buck and turning themselves into day traders. But yeah, my philosophy is very much a buy and hold. And this actually what I wanted to get into with you next is, it sounds to me that you understand the value of buy, hold, and I would assume if you need something liquidated, instead of selling, borrowing against the asset. Is that kind of the plan in the future? If you ever did need to, come up with $1 million, you would borrow?
We haven't done that yet on the corporate treasury end, but I've definitely played around with lending personally. And I think that is a great utility, particularly on Ethereum. And you can do it through like BlockFi, and there's other institutional groups you can do it with Bitcoin. But on ETH you can do it in like a decentralized way through like Aave and Compound and stuff. And that's amazing. And the great thing about ETH too is just like the utility of it. I mean, granted, gas fees are pretty crazy, but it is amazing that people still do it. People will spend $50, $100 on a transaction, and it's just like the value is so great that people are still willing to do that. And I know that there are all these layer 2 plans, and there are layer 2s in action right now. I mean, where you can get pretty cheap transactions on Ethereum. But I think that, we chose to build with ETH because of that utility. And I think that Bitcoin is much more of like a buy and hold mentality. ETH is sort of like buy, hold, and use. I think Bitcoin is also buy, hold, and use. And like with Lightning, I think that payments are happening in a better way. And like what El Salvador has done is just unbelievable. Like, I can't wait to go down there and visit Bitcoin Beach. But I think that the volatility also makes it questionable for, I don't exactly know how they're handling. I think that they might be using just the rails in El Salvador and doing stuff with stable coins as well. I'm not exactly sure how they're doing it, but Michael Saylor specifically says that it's, it's not a currency, and it's actually not meant to be a currency. It's meant to be that that sound hard asset, like the hardest asset known to mankind. And so yes, you can transact with it, but I think that it's going to be a combination of things. Different people are going to have different uses for it, and different participants will have different tolerances to the volatility. But in terms of like pricing products in a super volatile asset, that does get pretty complicated.
Yeah. I think I tend to agree with Michael Saylor there. I think of it more as a crypto asset or crypto property, digital property.
Yeah.
That, kind of like if you were buying real estate, you wouldn't use your land or your home to buy something. You would ideally never sell your home. And if you needed cash to buy something, you would borrow against the home, and, now you have cash to spend. So just to kind of dig a touch deeper there, if your crypto assets that you've bought, and it sounds like you're going to continue kind of adding to over time with revenue or possibly future fundraising rounds, is it a thought in your head or in the head of kind of your CFO, whoever wears that hat, that maybe if these assets appreciate enough over time and you keep adding to them, that you actually don't need to go out for any other official round of funding and dilute your ownership in the company?
That'd be ideal.
Okay.
That's for sure. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, maximizing exposure, that's kind of where I'm coming from at it. And, but at the end of the day, we're kind of going to see what happens. And if that becomes a possibility, I think that makes everybody happy. And, but, even if it doesn't appreciate at that rate, it's still, as long as it holds value, I think that it's a win, because we're participating and helping fuel an economic system that is just better. Right. So, even if it stayed flat, I would feel good about the move.
Right. I think that's a great point, and something that often is not made clear from Bitcoiners or anybody in these kind of crypto asset communities, is that it's not really about the appreciation of the asset. If that comes because you happen to get into a store of value asset before others, then great. Yes, it will technically appreciate as others rush into it. But the real goal of something like Bitcoin is just to preserve the purchasing power from the moment you got into it, because anything else is melting. So I guess another question I have for you is, and let's kind of play with the NFT craze. 5% in Bitcoin, 5% in Ether. How come not 5% in random NFTs?
I think that goes a little bit outside of, art is very complicated market. And not that NFTs are just art. NFTs can represent any unique thing. And I think that they're fascinating to me. And, we're even having conversations about supporting NFTs on Minds, so that users can bring their NFTs with them, display them, potentially mint and trade them. Cause we already have all the content, and people are uploading. So major NFT marketplaces are sort of quasi social networks. So I definitely am interested in them. Am very, they can represent access. So there's sort of like a membership element to it. Like if you have a certain NFT, you can access certain features.
Right.
Originally we had been playing with like recurring payments on ETH are just not really working well. Like we did try to build some stuff with that, but it just gets overly complex with all the gas and fluctuation, and the NFTs as membership are really cool. So, I just, there, NFTs are, as some people, I'm not going to degrade them, but this is just a phrase I've seen going around. It's just like illiquid JPEGs. But again, I like them. I think that who knows the future. I would prefer to just, stay focused on what we know and really understand. And exposure to ETH is exposure to NFTs in a sense. I mean,
Yeah.
ETH is kind of the underlying fuel of all of it. So, I think it's just, personally, again, sort of a little bit of difference. Like I've dabbled a little bit, but I also, you have to be a pretty big player to be able to justify. I mean, it's like an art collector. Like you have to have a lot of money to actually benefit from participating and profiting from the art market. Like it's totally doable, but I think you need to have a certain net worth in order to be able to move things around effectively and even buy the pieces that are strategic.
Yeah. And as you know very well, there are a lot of potential competitors to Ethereum these days. I think we could have a separate discussion about whether Bitcoin has a true competitor, but Ethereum clearly has competitors that are building similar blockchains with different functionality. Would Minds ever consider moving away from Ethereum as its blockchain? And what would have to happen? What would have to maybe go wrong with Ethereum or go right with another competitor for Minds to actually make that shift?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely interested in networking and, like, potentially supporting a lot of these different assets for, so the creators can like tip each other and whatnot. But in terms of migrating our infrastructure, our token, that's not, it doesn't really make that much sense to me, just because I know that different blockchains are EVM compatible, and that there's sort of this multi-chain ecosystem emerging, but ETH is just the tool set that, like Uniswap, for instance. We have a back-end integration with Uniswap so that, participants there, we can reward our participants who use Uniswap. And there's just nothing like that on other chains. I mean, I'm sure they're going to come, and I have a lot of respect for like the Solana people and the Avalanche people and others. So I'm all for building cool stuff, but I don't really see the benefit to moving. But I would absolutely collaborate in different ways.
Yeah. And when you actually executed on this strategy, I'm assuming that, $10 million from your Series B hits the bank account. How do you actually execute on taking the money from the bank there and turning it into crypto for your balance sheet? Did you do everything through Circle?
No, we used Coinbase.
And did you make one lump sum purchase, or did you kind of buy bits and
we
pieces?
Spread it a bit. Probably, I think dollar cost averaging is always a good move, to just spread it out over time to kind of stay away from the volatility and kind of get some just have less risk. But at the same time, we're not traders, and we're not trying to be traders. I'm not personally interested. Like, I'm focused on building products.
Yeah.
I'm focused on networking, growing our app, growing our community, not sitting here like trying to overthink it. So, we pulled some quick triggers basically, but
Yeah.
I think that there are probably slightly more efficient ways that it could have been done, but it's sort of like, I just need to be very conscious of time and not getting distracted.
Yeah. Another thing that I look at or research a lot is this concept of portfolio construction, which really applies to individuals, companies, governments, nation states, everything. And there is this concept that having a small percentage or some percentage of your balance sheet, whether an individual all the way up to a nation state, having a percentage in the crypto market gives you kind of this uncorrelated high alpha potential return that actually, even if you just did 1%, even if you aren't a believer in these assets, it mathematically makes your overall portfolio safer and stronger. So two questions on that. First is, do you think it's inevitable that every, hedge fund, every nation state, every public company, every private company, and even every individual in the future, you tell me how far out, but in the future, everybody has at least some percentage of their wealth stored in a crypto asset?
Yeah, I do think so. I mean, not, you can never say 100%. But I think we will continue to see exponential growth up to as close to that line as you can get. There's always going to be a certain percentage of people who are just like not even participating in the economy and like live in the woods. Um, so, but yeah, I mean, I love the nation state discussion around, like what El Salvador is doing and how the US might approach that. I think from a national security perspective, quite frankly, it is negligent to not participate. I think that it is at this point a digital arms race almost. And block space is, digital property. Uh, it is control over this data layer of the global infrastructure. And so to not be heavily exposed, even if, so if you're the US and you're running the treasury, like I understand, like you need to be careful because, you make a huge announcement about the US, purchasing, $100 billion of Bitcoin, then suddenly confidence in the dollar starts to maybe change. But at the same time, so I personally wouldn't be surprised if way more nation states than we're currently aware of are stockpiling in the background secretly, just because for this national security reason. Even if like the CIA was, making the case that, we need to control this asset because, this is just going to give us leverage, globally, for X, Y, and Z reason. So, it was really interesting to see what happened with the recent Fed announcement and, how the whole market, well, and this is like typical, and I'm, again, not an expert on this, but, both, equities and Bitcoin sort of behaved similarly in reaction to that announcement. And, that just because, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like, when bonds are offering, better deal, that makes institutional investors sort of have more faith in going to the bonds as opposed to, tech stocks and Bitcoin. And so when bonds become a better investment and, are paying more to investors, then that's going to pull money away from, these kind of more volatile markets. So that does make sense to me. And so, but actually, I think it also is showing that Bitcoin and crypto aren't as uncorrelated as we
Yeah.
also thought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was my next question
Yeah.
is basically, is this, lack of correlation narrative holding up, or is it not really practical? Because and here's my analysis would be that although these technically live in separate economies on blockchains in digital space, the money and the liquidity being put on these blockchains is still human. It's still based on people, where if the traditional economy were to crash, people are going to still have to come up with cash to pay their rent next month. And they're going to take that liquidity from wherever it is. And so I think there's some argument to be made that the more liquidity in the market, the more money goes into these crypto assets, because the more extra money each individual has, especially with things like the Fed stimulus, that really boosts these particular assets. And there's some argument that we haven't seen how these assets perform in a recession or a depression, because again, Bitcoin was kind of founded by Satoshi Nakamoto in response to the 2008 crisis. So I do think that they are a lot more correlated than we maybe tell ourselves, and that might hurt a lot of us. But again, I think if your time horizon is 10 years and more people are getting educated that the dollar is melting, and that the dollar, even though it's probably going to be and is the strongest nation state currency or fiat currency, that just means that the other currencies are melting a little bit faster. And we in America tend to have banking access to, PayPal, Square, all of these different services and products. And but to the rest of the world, this situation gets scary, and we see it play out almost every couple of months. You have a new country. Right now it's Turkey, where the inflation rate is spiking and going crazy. And this is also the first time that we have an alternative where somebody in Turkey can actually protect their wealth. And it would take a lot of education, and but it's a very exciting time. I think it's super exciting what you're doing with Minds and turning the balance sheet into crypto. And I guess if Bitcoin and Ether appreciate, if they 4x over the next few years, that's basically going to, whether you like it or not, mean that you're in 99% of your balance sheet is going to become crypto.
Yeah, I would love that to happen just naturally, regardless of what anyone originally sort of expected. And the last point I would make, I agree with everything you just said, but also that think about how fascinating it is with the Fed and different central banks now being aware of this correlation, and but also Bitcoin and crypto are this elephant in the room, in a sense, keeping central banks in check.
Yeah.
Because they now know what happened after they printed money. They saw where it went. And so like I have no desire for the dollar to tank. That doesn't help anybody. In crypto, we care about sound money principles. We want the US and other central banks to adopt more sound money principles. And so but the reality is that they don't have a choice.
Right.
On the long term, they have to keep doing what they've always done. And they're probably going, the US is in a much better position than other central banks. So, but the fact is that Bitcoin is still just that invisible, Satoshi is just sitting in those boardroom calls with the Fed. He's in there.
Yeah.
And they know that this technology is just watching and waiting for them. So that's just like a beautiful sort of natural force and like human innovation that it's like, too bad it exists now, and it's here to sort of subtly enforce those principles.
Yeah, it's the first real competition to central bank monetary policy, and people seem to appreciate the transparency of the crypto approach. Let's end by going just deep into speculation territory here for a second. And apologize, listeners, if I start to sound much more speculatory than usual, but it seems to me that we're in an unescapable pattern. The Federal Reserve is in an unescapable pattern of needing to print more money. I don't see how they turn the faucet off. And they also are in a position where they can't really raise interest rates because I think it's like $10 trillion worth of debt. The interest rate on that debt would also go up, and basically we wouldn't be able to afford just the interest payments on the debt, let alone paying down the principal. I think that Bitcoin presents the greatest opportunity to the US government ever, because if you have the ability to print money, you can do this. Here's what I think will ultimately become the playbook. The Federal Reserve will print, let's just call it $5 trillion. They will immediately take that $5 trillion, buy Bitcoin, hold the Bitcoin on their balance sheet, and then announce to the world that they did so, which would signal a really big appreciation in Bitcoin to see the government, US government, taking such a huge step into the market. And so they would probably immediately double their $5 trillion return right there. And it's fake money anyway, because it's just money that they're printing to now turn into a hard asset. So if you had a money printer at your house, you would be going burr all the time and buying Bitcoin, turning that printed money into Bitcoin. But then you don't have the ability to go out there and promote the fact that you made that purchase, so it wouldn't really appreciate on top of it. But they could actually de-risk it by then going out and saying, hey, we think every country should do this. And that would appreciate that $5 trillion buy instantly, and they would have de-risked it and made their money back in hard assets. So I think that that's the end game here. Any thoughts on that?
I hope so. One interesting debate I've seen happening around various risks, to play devil's advocate of Bitcoin. Even if you look at Coinbase's S1 doc, where they sort of discuss the risks actually, and based on my readings of Satoshi, he seems like exactly the type of like perfect persona that you would want to found this. But the reality is that Satoshi has roughly 1 million Bitcoin. And we don't know who Satoshi is, if he even has access to those coins. Who knows? And comparably, I think it was the one of the Gitcoin co-founders just mentioning this, but comparably, Vitalik actually has less ETH than Satoshi has Bitcoin. Because and look, I'm not coming at this isn't like an attack. It's just an important thought experiment to play. As different countries and whoever is evaluating, like, the Satoshi coins are a risk. They are also a potential feature, because maybe Satoshi's dead. Maybe those are, no longer part of the supply. Maybe he threw away the keys. Maybe he's never gonna use them. Maybe but worst case scenario, they all get dumped on the market. I think that if the market reached a certain size, then they could probably get dumped and it would be bad, but it would not stop Bitcoin. I'm curious kind of your thoughts on that. Yeah,
I've thought about this as well. My take is that they haven't moved in 10 years, and there's literally billions and billions of dollars worth of incentive to hit that cash out button. So I don't know what number he would be waiting for. But he or she, they, whoever it is. But my actual point to that would be, if that happened, if the Satoshi coins were liquidated and put up for sale, I agree it would crash the price. But I actually think, in the same way that the miners moving out of China de-risked one of the kind of top narrative threats long term, I think it would actually also remove another narrative threat, because now the ownership of Bitcoin would be even more decentralized. Yes, it would crash the price temporarily, but Bitcoin is a forever protocol. There really is no foreseeable end to Bitcoin. And so, I think it would be another kind of a more exaggerated situation, like what we saw, where Bitcoin miners and the hash rate moved out of China and had to decentralize more, that that, was bad for the price initially, but actually is even better for long term. And I think the same thing would happen if Satoshi liquidated his coins. I think it would be overall net positive long term. It would hurt the asset price in the short term, net positive long term.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't think that Satoshi would want, Satoshi actually doesn't have incentive to dump everything, if anything, kind of slowly.
Right.
But if they slowly started to get liquidated, then you just have to, if you're in, the US government's position and you don't know who Satoshi is,
Yeah.
you're literally like, okay, this is clearly like an unstoppable force of humanity and like we need to be involved in it. But if we go deep and throw, trillions of dollars at it, we are literally enriching this anonymous entity to such a dramatic degree. But like, again, the same, it's a little bit more transparent in ETH, like who the players are, I guess. But at the end of the day, the US government still like it's not like they don't engage with certain corporate, huge corporations. The US government is enriching all kinds of corporations and engaging with them. So, but the fact that it's unknown with Satoshi, I think that, again, I think there's just a great debate about, feature versus bug. Ultimately, I think it is more of a feature, but I can understand why there would be hesitancy without having that information.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it cuts both ways, but ultimately, because it cuts both ways, it will have some short-term hit and long-term positivity. So let me get to the last two questions here that I ask every guest. The first one is actually what your thoughts are on Bitcoin, but I think that we've already touched on that plenty. So I'll just skip right to the last question for you today, Bill. Actually, before I get to the last question, why don't you give listeners some links or places they can go to follow your work, check out all the great things going on at minds.com.
Yeah, you can find me at Ottman, Ottman on Minds, minds.com/Ottman, or, you can get our mobile apps, minds.com/mobile. And yeah, hit me up. Feel free to get in touch directly. I'm, usually semi-accessible and, I'm really excited to connect with people in the community. So yeah, hit me up.
Actually, there's one question that I forgot to ask, which is how would it work for a company to hold the private keys or the Bitcoin? Are you guys holding it on Coinbase? Does some individual at your company get
we use custody?
Okay.
So Coinbase custody basically has like really robust security tools.
Okay.
And like multi-sig situations for, if anything is going to get moved, like, you need multiple signers. Multi-sigs are amazing. We didn't get into that much, but I think just what a really cool invention. And with like Gnosis safes on Ethereum, they're just, it's unbelievable technology. I love it. So yeah, we're using custody because, as much as I self-custody with a lot of my personal stuff, but I think that Coinbase is really a beast of a company, and I do, for the purposes now where that's what Minds is using. Yeah.
Okay, cool. And by the way, all these questions I'm asking are for selfish reasons because it's something that I've wanted to do, for a next round of funding to convert some percentage of it into crypto. I think just makes a ton of sense and sets the company up for the long term. Last question for you here, for real this time, is are we living in a simulation?
Oh, I love this one. So the simulation theory is interesting to me because it feels very, sci-fi and technical, but it's really, in a sense, just another word for God. Because, if you have the programmers of the simulation, well, who are they? I mean, it's really, you're talking, I mean, ultimately, I think, I mean, my gut after, being down a million rabbit holes and just, meditating basically, I do think that systems, physical systems, universal systems are sort of fractal. I mean, that on an intuitive level makes a lot of sense to me. So, whether you're going inside or outside, I think that there's a lot more to these systems and, the role that consciousness plays in all of the systems than, is currently readily apparent. And there's been some really, really solid breakthroughs that have been happening in terms of the discourse on like the materialist emergent view of consciousness versus more of the panpsychist fundamental consciousness view on kind of the hard problem of consciousness.
Right.
Because I think simulation really does, it is sort of it's thinking about consciousness. So like whether this is like in some sort of super advanced AI simulation, or you call that, whatever word, spiritual word you want to call it, doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, it's like, is consciousness the fundamental force of all matter in the universe? If it is, then I think simulation, it basically, it pretty much is simulation theory. And if, and the my issue, I recommend watching the Rogan episode with Philip Goff. I think that's his name.
Mhm.
Really good one. And he's like this panpsychist philosopher. But like determining the point at which consciousness emerges is so arbitrary when you start actually asking yourself, okay, it's a plant, or well, now it's a cell. No, well then you just sort of keep going. And I can't personally make myself pick a point at which consciousness emerges. And so I actually do find myself, being agnostic, but at the same time, probably bending slightly towards the panpsychist philosophical view. But yeah, anyway, that's a long-winded way. What about you?
Well, let me ask one more layer deeper. Then you brought up determinism. Whether we're in a simulation or not, do you believe that you, Bill, have free will?
I don't. No.
So you would say, I guess then you'd fall a little bit more deterministic. You'd say that all the decisions you're making, what you perceive as consciousness, is really just your conscious mind processing a decision already made by your subconscious and kind of your programming.
Yeah, and I don't, so from like a definition perspective on free will, like I definitely am more of a determinist, but I don't, unfortunately, like free will you don't want to lose sort of the spirit of free will. I think that it's really important. And I think a lot of people resist determinism because they sort of, their ego is like clinging to this idea that, they don't want to think that, oh no, I'm not making decisions for myself. Like I'm a powerful actor in this universe. And I do think that, from a practical perspective, it is absolutely necessary to behave as if free will does exist.
Right.
And to be very, as conscious as possible and as grounded in your first principles as possible when making the decisions that you make every day. So it's almost like we need to slightly evolve the language so that we can, keep the good things about free will, but not be delusional about the way that the universe actually works.
Yeah. And to get to your point, and sorry, listeners who've already heard kind of my response to this, my view is that whether we're in a simulation or not, the same things matter. Whether you're in a simulated experience or a real experience, what matters is, friends, family, relationships, doing what you love, being kind to others, and that basically, the medium doesn't matter. What matters is all the same kind of hard to define relationship and personal goals and moments and experiences in life. And so if I had to go one way or the other, I'd say probabilistically, it seems more likely that we're in a simulation, especially when you consider just in our own lifetimes how we've seen technology rapidly improve to, I mean, I don't know about you, but I actually spent some time in the Oculus Rift and in the metaverse because we have one here at the house, and it's shocking. You know, you see people put those headsets on and then they play a shooting game with grenades and then they run into a wall. It feels real and it tricks the mind. And so I definitely think it's possible for technology to trick the mind. And if I extend, you know, just the current Oculus Rift technology out 100 years, it's definitely possible to simulate real world life and experience.
For sure.
I don't know who would be behind it or why, but yeah, ultimately, this is the life I've
give a
got.
trillion years of evolution. I mean,
Yeah,
you know, you this is possible. What we're experiencing right now. I definitely, you know, resonate with what you're saying about, you know, your behavior really shouldn't change regardless. Though, what I would say is that I think that the hard problem of consciousness matters a lot, and in that I want to, I don't, you know, I don't want to die not having given my best shot and, you know, pushed society to get to the bottom of the nature of reality as much as we possibly can.
right.
Because, you know, whether you're talking about all the classified information that the, you know, various governments have about the nature of reality and, you know, different phenomena, you know, that and the correlation actually between that, you know, alien stuff with consciousness, you know, that's obviously totally speculative, but I think that as long as we don't have access to the totality of information about the nature of our world, like, and in a very simplistic way, it's like there we have access to less information than information that exists. I mean,
Right.
so we're literally sitting here knowing what we don't know, knowing that the government has access to all of this intelligence that may or may not be solving those problems, but we need to put in, you know, Project Censored in a sense, you know, pushes for a lot of this transparency. And I think that that is just so essential. And like freedom of information to me is baseline what we need to get to as soon as possible to be able to even have conversations that are educated about these issues. Like, otherwise we're just speculating when it's like, oh, wait a second, those guys over there have access to this information. Like, that's just like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah. On that point, many people go back to the kind of I think, therefore I am as kind of the baseline of do I exist? And then what I tend to fall back on when I, you know, keep digging on why does any of this matter? Why would life have meaning? Is the kind of famous quote, we are a way for the cosmos to know itself. And so for that reason, yeah, we need to keep exploring the nature of reality and, you know, get as much of the information out as we can. Um, the last thing I'll say on this is on the simulation theory is that in our own worlds today, whatever our experience is, whether simulation or not, we find ourselves being attracted to watching movies, you know, immersive technology, VR experiences. So to me, it's very possible, if not likely, that we are in a simulation because our decisions, our behaviors seem to keep wanting to go inside of a simulation, inside of a simulation, inside of a simulation, like Inception style. So it's possible that we're not just inside of one simulation, we would be like, you know, inside 10 deep in a simulation. And that would still also be technologically possible. Any thoughts on a simulation within a simulation?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, it would definitely be multi-layered, infinitely layered, infinitely dimensional, and you know, I think Elon said, not that everything that Elon says is you know, dogma or anything, but like he actually made a shocking statement that he thought that there was a 1 in a billion chance that we're not.
Yeah.
I mean, that is something that is just such a dramatic statement that, but I mean, I think that it's reasonable. And I think looking at the patterns of nature are, I think that they do, we do see these patterns on different kind of layers of systems. And so, yeah, to your point, I think that the fact that we find ourselves building simulations ourselves is pretty, it is definitely an important piece of evidence.
Yeah, and to Elon's kind of math there, and that was kind of the probability that I was mentioning earlier, is if simulations are kind of infinitely repeatable and scalable, and you can spin off new simulations for infinity, then what your math really is I'm either in the base reality before we've reached that level of simulated life, or I'm in one of the billions, trillions of infinitely created simulated lives. So you basically just have to decide, am I in the base reality at the right moment in time, in the right, life where we haven't reached that technology yet, or am I in one of the simulated lives? So anyway, Bill, thank you so much. Took a lot longer at the end there than maybe we were planning on, but these are such interesting topics. I love having you on. Hope to keep in touch and talk more soon. And I hope everyone goes and follows the amazing work you're doing at minds.com that we didn't really get to touch too much on, but is actually, last thing, give us the pitch. Why is minds.com the anti-Facebook or alternative to Facebook?
Hyper transparency. Everything we do is fully open source. We're trying to, Google says don't be evil. Our mission is more can't be. Make it hard for, we're trying to engineer ourselves out of the driver's seat and give people maximum freedom and financial opportunity. And so anyway, yeah, hit me up. Hopefully, I think Project Sensor is on there. I think we got to get you on there. We'll follow up, Chase. But thanks for having me, man. I really enjoyed talking to you, and I hope we can do it again sometime.
Absolutely. Thanks, Bill. We'll talk more soon. Take care.